We're the Sweeney son, and we haven't had any dinner. So you're going to tell me where those photographs are, unless you want a good kicking. Oh dear me, I didn't see you there. I'm so terribly sorry. The Mk2 Ford Granada. It's been in the Sweeney. It's been in the Professionals. It's been in Dempsey and Makepeace. It's one of the most iconic cars of the 1970s and 80s. Is it any good? Should you care? Why, let's find out, shall we? Granada. Go, go, go!
Gosh!
And here we are with anchors tying us to what we'll call home, even if the side of it has not yet touched our eyes. And here we are. Here we are with anchors tying us to what we'll call home, even if the side of it is not yet.
Welcome to the first of a series of retro tweed jacket reviews. We're in the Midlands with the kind hospitality of Mr. James Coleman, also known as a rubbish mechanic. And this is one of his cars. This is a 1982 Ford Granada Ghia X Estate with a 2.8 litre Cologne V6 engine. So thanks, James.
Thank you.
Thames. So what can I tell you about the Ford Granada Mk2? It was first introduced in 1977 and it was in production until 1985. It's very similar underneath to the Mark 1 Granada and Consul that was launched in 72, and the Consul 3000 GT was the car that was featured in the first 3 series of the Sweeney. The engines available in the Mk2 Ford Granada were a 2-litre 4-cylinder engine, also known as a Pinto engine because it was used in the Ford Pinto in America, a 2.3-litre V6 engine, and a 2.8-litre V6 like this one that was available in 3 different power outputs. One with a single carburettor, one with a Weber carburettor, which is this one, and one with fuel injection. This car has about 163 horsepower. The trim levels available in the Mk2 Ford Granada were a base trim that was normally used only for fleet cars, fleets like the MOD. There was an L, there was a GL, there was also an LX later on in the car's life, and then we get onto the really nice ones. The car used in the 4th series of the Sweeney was an injection S, which was a sporty model. Above that, there was also a car just called the Injection, which again was a sort of sports type one. The luxury models, and there were 3 of them, were the Ghia X, and the very, very rare, only available in 84 and 85, the Ghia X Executive. This is a Ghia X, and it's got everything that the 1980s businessmen want in a top-of-the-range car. This Ghia X has cruise control, a trip computer, air conditioning, electric seats, electric windows, electric mirrors. That's a very advanced specification for something that was made in the early 1980s. The Ghia X Executive took this one stage further by having full Connolly leather upholstery. That just sounds like a politician's dream. This particular car has the very, very rare 5-speed manual gearbox. Now, the change does take a bit of getting used to. The travel on the clutch is really, really long. It's like putting your foot down a manhole, in a way. And you can't rush for changes. But it does make you drive a lot more deliberately and a lot more carefully. This car has actually been slightly modified in the fact that apart from the 163 brake horsepower engine with the Weber carburettor, it's even got a limited differential. And if you're coming out of a junction, particularly as today it's a little bit damp, you've got to be really careful about putting too much power on, otherwise you'll spin the tyres. I gather from Mr. Coleman that this car does do donuts. Oh yes, sir. On these country roads between Nuneaton and Coventry, This car feels really good. Often the V6s were used as police pursuit cars. They were used by famous detectives. And you can see barreling along here at about 50 miles an hour. The car feels very good. The steering feels a bit looser than a modern car, but that's part of the course of something that's designed about 40 years ago. The handling actually is okay. There's not as much body roll as I was expecting, and the steering is so direct, and you can feel everything the car's doing, that it's an absolute joy to be sitting at the steering wheel of this Granada. One of the things you Ford experts will notice about this car is that the wheels are not the originals. Now, there were Ghia wheels for the Mark II Granada, but there were also what are called TRX wheels, and this being a Ghia X came originally with the TRX wheels. Because the tyres are virtually impossible to find anymore for the TRX wheels, the only other car which shared them was the Ferrari Mondial for some reason. Mr. Coleman has very sensibly put Mark III Granada Scorpio wheels on it, which actually really suit the car. It's much easier to find tyres for them, and they don't cost £3,000 for a set of 4. The Mark II Granada was most famously used in the professionals. In the first series, there's a sort of sandy beige coloured 2-litre GL model. In the second and third series, there's a red Granada 2.8. It's actually two different cars, although we have the same false plate on them. One was a 2.8 Ghia carburettor, a bit like this one. And then there was also, in the third series, a 2.8 injection gear. And then in the fourth and fifth series, there were two black or sort of midnight blue 2.8 injection gears. The other Mark II Granadas that I remember were from the Sweeney. There was a Granada Mk2 Estate in the Sweeney 2 film. There was also the 2.8 injection S, which is the same colour as this, used in the Series 4 title sequence and some Series 4 episodes. There was also a 2.3 GL on an A plate that was used in the first two series of Dempsey and Makepeace.
With our shortcomings, it's not as if we don't have to wipe away the tears. From time to time we wouldn't lie, but there's a promise for our broken lives, and dawn breaks on our horizons, and we will not be disappointed.
That was amazing. I feel like a real man from the 1970s. It's like driving around in a museum piece, this car. Anyway, let's see if this museum piece has any modern day practicality, and look in the boot. James, would you mind opening the boot for me, please? One of the common problems with the Mark II Granada Estate is the struts tend to go. And James has replaced these a number of times, and they're about £80 every time it happens. So rather than paying £80 every 6 months for that to happen, because that's how long they last, we have this handy replacement here. The boot capacity of the Mark II Granada Estate is 23 cubic feet in old money, or 650 litres. Now I would take the spare wheel out and show you, but it's a bit of a pain, so we won't do that. None of the cars actually came with a load blind, which is unusual these days, but there's plenty of room in here for whatever you want. I think if the police use a lot of these, and obviously if you wanted traffic cones and road signs and things like that, then they'd all fit in here quite nicely. One thing you do find on this car though is these little side pockets, which are useful for things like spare bulbs and putting the jack in. And in a car like this, you definitely need to know where your jack is. Okay, I'd normally close the boot on my own, but James, would you just oblige for me, and I'll just go and take a seat in this lovely sofa, the lovely brown sofa in the back. The rear seats in this Granada remind me of going round to an elderly relative in the 1970s and sitting down on their brown sofa, and it certainly feels like it. These seats are really, really comfortable. For reference, this is my driving position. I'm 5'11", and I've got loads and loads of knee room. Headroom is fine as well. One thing you've got to bear in mind is these rear seats don't split when you fold them. They only come down as one complete piece. If you're the Sweeney, then of course you're going to be smoking a lot. And there's an ashtray in each door and a cigarette lighter just down there. Obviously it works for a 12-volt socket as well, but you can see this car was designed to take burly detectives around London at high speed. Another nice thing about this car is the tweed jacket. It blends really nicely with this lovely Chatsworth fabric on the seats and on the doors, and also with this fake wood trim. It's beautiful. But if you fancy yourself as maybe a sort of budding George Cowley or Ray Spikings, and you want to sit in the front, and that's where we're going to go now. The theme of sophisticated 70s comfort continues in the front. I've got this big centre armrest for holding cassettes from the 6-speaker stereo. I've got electric seat adjustment because this is a Ghia X, 4 electric windows, air conditioning, and a trip computer. This car was really something when it was made in 1982. In terms of ergonomics, well, it's a bit of a mixed bag really. I've got the heater controls and the air conditioning controls very close to the steering wheel, but the light switches are all over the place. One's where the wiper switch should be, and there are 2 on this left side of the steering wheel. Maybe it's just me, or maybe they just had bad ergonomics in the 70s. In terms of practicality, the door bins are a reasonable size. The glove box, well, it's pretty good for your secret mission documents. And there's no cup holders in here, but there are little grooves here for putting in a nice 50p piece. This is a very rare 2.8 carburettor manual car, and the clutch feels like you're putting your foot into a manhole, to be honest. The travel is amazing. But the gearbox is reasonably good. The visibility in this car is astonishingly good. The pillars are really slim. There's loads and loads of glass. You don't need parking sensors or a reversing camera or anything like that. It's pretty much like parking a really small car just because you can see so much. The steering column in this car doesn't adjust for rake or reach. But you do have some nice instruments. Because this is a Ghia X, you've got an oil pressure gauge and a voltmeter, and you've got the rev counter and the speedometer. The rev counter goes the opposite way round as to what you'd expect for some reason. But it's nice and clear to read, although in this car the speedo underreads and the rev counter underreads too, so who knows what's going on. So then, what do I think of the Mk2 Granada Estate? Well, this car is actually very rare. They were once very common, but nowadays one, particularly one in this condition, is very rare and very valuable. If you ever get the chance to drive one, I would definitely take it. I haven't ever driven a car with so much character as this since I had an old Triumph Dolomite. Oh, dear me, excuse me. Get your trousers on. You're nicked.
Owning a Mk2 Granada in the 21st century is indeed a great privilege, and I consider myself very lucky. However, finding a good vehicle now in the 21st century is very, very difficult, as they tend to rust quite heavily. The engines tend to use quite a bit of oil. They're good for water leaks, but as long as you keep on top of the engine and the running costs, they're an absolute dream to drive, and they will never break down. Such a very nice car to own. I consider myself very lucky.
Thank you for watching this episode of Tweed Jacket Reviews. My name is Joseph Lloyd. I'm an independent vehicle consultant. I find cars for people. Please subscribe to the channel if you'd like to do that. Don't forget to like this video and to leave a comment below. If you wish me to source a car for you, I'd love to do that. My website is www.lloydvehicleconsulting.co.uk. Please use the contact me page on my website to get in touch. I've got a Facebook page as well. It's facebook.com/Lloyd Vehicle Consulting. Thank you. It does smell really good.